This storm is a major problem for us, and what happened after the storm is the police. A minute ago, video came out of Eustace's workshop that has made everyone doubt everything they believed they knew about Eustace Conway and his famous Alpine hideaway. What was found in that workshop was so frightening that it made even tough camera crews step back in not believing. People thought Eustace's workshop was a really well-protected place. It was out of sight, between tall woods, and only reachable by a small, overgrown path up to now. What secrets does the famous mountain hold? What has man been hiding in this strange structure? As the entrance to this secret opened to the public for the first time, what was found in there will startle you. Before we go ahead with this breaking news, be sure to click the like button and subscribe to stay kept up to date on all the surprising news come from men who live in the mountains. You won't want to not get all the juicy details regarding this dude from the mountains. Eustace Conway's now workshop. This beautiful thing is around 200 yards from Eustace's main room. It was in a thick grove of old hemlocks. The sun barely got through the dense layer of green plants. Years ago, the workshop was made, but not a single person not familiar with how a mountain works the man has come into the workshop. Eustace has kept strangers away and stuck close to associates even more far away. A lot of people have asked to be shown around the shop, although a lot of them have been turned down. Eustace often gave his rejection with a sharp no sound. He would sometimes change the topic to talk on something he was more willing to. The building itself was not taking part in the conversation. It seemed like it was easy on the outside. Logs were used to build the building, and the roof was covered in moss and tilted. There were pieces of wood and other things around the house, like a cloak, and a single door, warm, stood right in front of it. It looked like an old-fashioned setup, but that only helped make it look like anything that came directly out of a museum instead of just a standard of building that works. What might have caused to the uncommon chance to get a look at this workshop? We are getting to that sooner than you might imagine. When the team that makes the show finally got the go-ahead to go in, the things were very strange. Eustace had been acting weird for weeks. They had made the choice to film long before they actually started space shooting. At that time, Eustace seems to zone out more often than normal. Crew members said that he seemed like they were distracted. A lot of people surrounding him saw that he was always looking across to the workshop during interviews, and at times he would halt talking in the middle of an answer as if he had heard something that no one else could find. His typical confidence seemed to wane. In front of their eyes, it looked like it now more like worry. It could have been expectation, but it was clear that everything he felt meant he was not comfortable. The change didn't happen at once. It took a while. The choice he chose to let people into his workshop to the world was starting to boil inside, and he didn't know if it was a good thing or not, or a negative thing. His movements got more planned. He would wake up in the middle of the night or in the dark the morning and find his way to his workshop with no light. People on the crew remembered seeing him stroll by memories and thought something was wrong. Change in this man. He was trying to break the mental grip he had on made with this store. The store contained the things that meant the most to him. How might someone get this? What was Eustace trying to do? It was hard for people watching to realize the adjustments he was making to himself with this choice. The day when they got to the workshop, everything was just like it always is. But for Eustace, his world was falling apart, from top to bottom. In his ears, the birds had stopped singing, and the woodland felt not as alive. He took the gang down to the shop in perfect silence, which made it to the group's rising stress. One person subsequently said it was like walking to a place where the rules of the real world didn't work anymore. The path itself looked longer than 200 yards. The crew members started to talk about the oddness of what had happened the morning prior they started this trip. Eustace looked like he had gone. The crew and other employees helped to look for him, but he was nowhere to be found. To be seen, they started to worry soon. There was no way he could have run from this. One problem, most of them thought in their heads. There was no sign or sound of him, and someone had the idea to look at the workshop. When someone said they were going to Eustace was at the workshop itself, found right in the middle of them, like a piece of furniture. When asked where he mumbled, "Where have you been all that time?" "I've always been here." It didn't make sense, but no one asked why. They went back to getting ready for the challenge ahead. As they trekked down they all went down the road to this famous workshop. Thought about the unusual things that had happened before this day. What they think sounded louder than the quiet. Every man was stuck in a mental battle of his own making. That was how it seemed until Eustace stood at the door of his beloved workshop. He tried to open it, but the old door wouldn't budge. The hinges broke the quiet with a booming, squeaky sound. He opened the door again, and this time he was able to do it. Everyone sought to have a look at the space right away. What came next, what they saw with their eyes, was not at all like what they thought it would be. Had thought. It wasn't a normal place to store tools and materials. It wasn't a normal place to work. It seemed like something bad. The walls were full of faces. It seemed like hundreds of faces all over the place, the size of the workshop. As Eustace opened the window folds wide, and they could now tell what the faces were, the group was affected by this picture. It proved all the rumors that had been going around. That had been going around about Eustace for a while. In reality, a story helped the spread happen. Of this story, one former pupil once narrated a story about Eustace working through the night, cutting wood, grumbling to himself about the figures, the link between the body and the spirit. He said he saw Eustace taking apart an ancient clock and putting it back together. It used tree sap and leather bands. It made little sense, yet the stories nevertheless still went around. Now, as the group stood in front of beautiful faces cut out of the logs that made up the building, they were curious about who this guy was. They seemed to have never met him. One of his students asked him how he would spend days here when the floor was barren ground and the faces might make any guy run at the first sign of trouble. People seemed to be interested in the workshop. Then the person who made it. What did Eustace Conway do with this bone? A scary place? Like the thoughts and a remembrance of the log faces that stuck were not enough, and a storm started. Lightning hit too many times for comfort, and one of the crew members that he had seen a person move in the one room that none of them had been in, alone stood at the end of the workshop, and none of them had moved on to join, even though they had come to shoot the workshop. They acted like there was no door at all, and betted it was time for Eustace to show them the way. They were fascinated and glanced about. Fear. No one would even come close to Eustace saw this in the faces. They had no idea that the absolute they wouldn't let terror into that room. Go in. This room creaked and swayed the same way. Slowly moved back and forth. Something it seemed like everything in the home alive. Eustace's forehead was covered in beads. Sweat. He was also worried. He had kept this house was his safe haven for a long time, and now he wanted to share that bit of him with everyone. He couldn't understand why. Maybe it was the curse of stars on reality TV. Nothing kept private for long. He took a deep breath and resolved to deal with it all. I can tell that everyone is looking at that door. Does anyone want to see what's inside? In? The men nodded in agreement and walked slowly after Eustace, putting their concerns carefully put away. They somehow wouldn't know it, but this chamber would ask more of them than it ever would give. Animal skulls hung in a ceremonial way, seeing designs on the four walls of the room. Walls! It appeared like they had all been chipped and fashioned to look like Eustace would like. Plants that have dried looked dead, but kept there was color all over the roof, but somehow didn't let off any smell. The floor was covered in tools. Chamber, yet their patterns were like never seen anything like it before. The blades were fashioned in ways that seemed unreasonable and didn't follow the usual way to think about constructing tools. The group was shocked and watched as eyes full of inquiries. What did this say about this man? And what was he doing with these things? This carried on for a long. When Eustace was going to show them out when someone I cut to a part of the roof that was dry plants had somehow not completely covered. He cried, "Look!" And everyone could see that something was really up there. Even though Eustace tried to whisper the group used the sticks even though they didn't like them. They had walked the distance to quickly pull the vines from the roof. They didn't need his consent anymore. The place was scary enough. The crew had a hard time getting it right, since every perspective seemed to show something fresh details. It was a complicated building that was made of wood, bone, and stone. Under the low lights, it was hard to be confident about anything else went into making this. One crew member said in a low voice that it looked like a map. Someone else commented it looked like a machine. One of them said it was not that, but something else completely, anything that didn't fit inside any group they knew about. Eustace studied their faces and a blank look on his face. but his intellect was running in all directions. When a person finally got the guts to ask what they were looking at, his answer was not at all satisfying. He just said it was work. The gang was aware that this was a day they would always remember. It was better to live through than to observe through the prism of a modified director's cut. Something else was very wrong. The workshop's temperature appeared not right. It wasn't meant to be stormy. In the middle of summer, only within the cold felt nearly like green leaves. Murder. If someone wasn't careful, they could get the flu after the workshop. It looked like everywhere was incredibly cold or wet. This was the type of cold that people want to depart but don't tell why because they couldn't even do it themselves. Tell me. Many crew members said feeling like they were being observed, even when they weren't sure that no one else was there. The cameras caught strange things that couldn't be described to the average person eye. Shadows shifted, animal sounds they hadn't heard with the normal ear when they were trapped in there on record. They sought to make fun of blaming them on anyone who was around the punchline of the joke at that point. The audio equipment kept breaking down. It created a loud whining sound at intervals that no one had noticed at time. It appeared like the ghost had pursued them through the parts of proof of the location. In one corner of they found a rough created a shelf. A lot of hand-bound journals filled the shelf. The writing was minuscule and went back and forth between English and another language. When asked if the crew could look at these journals, Eustace's refusal was quick and complete. He said clearly that those books were not for other people to read. Not yet, maybe not always. But in that little time before he relocated to get in the way of the camera's vision, the crew got brief looks at pages full of includes pictures. Most of them were stars, charts and drawings of plants of different kinds. Those were known to be rare and lethal. Others looked like they were trying to map forces or energies that were not seen that held the store together. The crew also found boxes full of things they couldn't figure out. Most of the items were powders and liquids, and things that have dried. Eustace said that they all came from the forest, and how they were kept said that their purpose was more not just keeping dying or herbs or treatments that go away. That identical label was on the containers, language that is hard to understand. Some people didn't have labels at all, but they were sealed with wax. The jar seemed to have dirt in it, yet when I looked more closely, the earth seemed to get a shine. It shone watched closely and then returned to its gloomy, inconspicuous condition when everyone acted like they weren't looking. In another jar, a clear liquid that was also not clear. It changed from one state to another, whenever they want. There was a third jar with crystal in it, structures that grew on their own agreement. Nothing was what it was intended to be in this house. It all seemed to be quite different from how it was supposed to be. Everything went against reason. If you thought if the materials were excess, then you are in for a shock. There seemed to be a bunch of recordings produced with old tapes. There was also a cylinder made of wax around. Eustace told them that he had been recording sounds from the hills for decades. But when asked what he was taping, he said sent shivers down the spines of everyone there. He claimed he was recording what speaks while people aren't paying attention. He said everything had a voice and went on an extended rant about how he thinks people should live and things that are alive. At this point, everyone started to wonder when this man's got so terrible that his mind went. A person said, "It's because he's always alone." Another person whispered to him, "Partner, Eustace has lost it." He heard the rumors and turned quickly, his speech coming to an end, but he knew how the gang would see him. He was probably presently going to be treated like someone with a mental illness or worse, like an old guy about to go into his grave at any moment. He nevertheless said that the recordings showed that there was something else about nature in the wild. The collection was very detailed and well organized by date and place, with notes in that strange writing system that covers the cases and labels. He seems to have spent a lot of time and research on this issue. One brave crew asked if they might hear some of the tapes. Eustace thought about this for a long time before saying yes to only play one. What did he have to lose? He had already told everything and departed, most of the explanation of the store to their creativity. He picked a random tape and went to an old cassette player that was hanging around. The noise that came from the speakers made everyone wishes they hadn't asked. They couldn't see why they had not turned around right away when they noticed the faces. What type of interest pulled them in? Must follow Eustace's direction through all corner of the store? It seemed like they were being forced to view the trip to the conclusion. The sound was hard to put into words. It began like wind blowing fast through the woods. Nevertheless, there was something that scared me on how the sound got into the air. The crew would have been able to hear if someone listened closely. It was so quiet that a pin drop could be heard. Throughout the room, one would see that there was a conversation going on, maybe not on the same level as normal people frequencies, but they could find something that sounds like a call in response. As their eyes got bigger at the observation, and some vehemently said no to admit what they saw, Eustace smiled to himself. At the very least now they would know he wasn't crazy. He wasn't going crazy over all the stuff in the forest. He had taken up an observation, and seeing it led to this huge snowball of strange findings. As the recording went on, the sounds got increasingly complicated. Harmonies flowed, and their impacts began to happen right in front of them. Eustace reached out to get something that looked like earplugs. Then a few members in the group crouched down in anguish, gripping the sides of their jaws hurt because their teeth hurt. Other people having trouble seeing and couldn't determine what was really going on with them. This sound that could not be identified or properly described had such a big influence on the people. When he saw that they couldn't deny the things anymore, they felt, so he turned off the tape. Play. The recording was less than 2 minutes long. But by the conclusion, everyone in that workshop longed to be anywhere else. The quiet that came after this, it was nearly too much to listen to. The guys seemed to be based in the workshop, although in their thoughts they had run away to society and had no plans to going back. Several crew members later said they had vivid dreams after listening to the recording. Dreams were full with strolling through woods that not quite right, and all of it seemed like it was growing the wrong direction. As the crew got ready to leave, someone saw something that had somehow been overlooked during the first jolt of coming in. On the wall closest to the door, cut out bigger than any other symbol and placed right at eye level for someone of Eustace's height, was a date. It wasn't written in numbers, but cut in a way that made it plain what it meant once you knew what you were looking at. The date was around 3 weeks in the future from the day we shot. Under it was carved into one word in English, done. The carving was new. This meant that Eustace had put this mark on it within days or even hours of letting the people inside. It didn't make sense, because he had been with them the whole time. All the time. When asked about this, roughly what it meant and what would happen modified his behavior once it was done completely. All the honesty he showed before it suddenly disappeared. He led them out with such speed and anger. He kept saying that they had seen enough. Thinking about what anyone would agree with what they saw. He said that not everything had to be comprehended by people watching. The door was locked up and shut tight. This crew members could swear while this was going on, they heard something moving inside, as if things were going back to the original places. The crew tried to ask more questions while they were walking back toward the main cabin, but Eustace did completely stop talking. Back at he gently but firmly asked the cabin staff to leave. The production team to leave Turtle Island right away. There wouldn't be any more that day of filming and maybe not again for a while. His hands shook a little as he put together their gear and led them to their cars, as they were happy to pack up, depart, but they also questioned what they were letting this man do. They were worried about him and what the woods may do to him. After what they had seen, and they had no plans to stay in after hearing there if they really didn't have to. In the days and weeks after the workshop visit, odd stories started to come from those that lived close by Eustace's land. People noticed saw lights in the woods and heard noises that didn't match those of animals. People who had resided in the area for longer than most started to show their pain. They gave credit to the terrifying modifications to Eustace's strange way of life. They thought he was only making things worse, when he could just leave things as they were by itself. Animals were starting to act in a strange way. They moved at the wrong times and came together in large groups, frightening anybody nearby with the sheer amount of animals gathered in one place. Plants were sprouting out of season, and some had started to grow in designs that no one has ever seen before. Warm Springs production tried a lot of different times to set up more filming. The crew didn't matter to the execs. Wasn't sure if they wanted to go back there. They had seen the cut. It seemed like simply the thing to get anyone's pay attention to the seams. This was their major break. Eustace's strange, almost life-threatening methods meant views, and views are worth money. You may have forgotten this, but the date carved was coming up quickly. The team was aware of it. Eustace knew it. This is why they were not that shocked when he said no to all the efforts to get him to do a second shooting. He gave a few different reasons. There was the weather and personal projects that got his attention and the urge for privacy. They knew it was something deeper than that. The date meant something. Since they first saw the carving had made them feel like they were about to die. Feeling of foreboding. One producer said getting a weird message from Eustace. It simply said, "Some doors formerly opened need certain circumstances to close the right way." The appointed date came, and most of the crew members refused to call in for work. Nobody knew what could have made them shake so much. Had the fulfillment that Eustace talked about happened as planned? Was it linked to the books, the recordings, or both those strange buildings? The production team looked over their footage, over and over again, and with each viewing, new details that hadn't been noticed before seemed to come to light. Been seen before. They observed what was said, shadows that made them laugh and make fun of Eustace's crew. There were also short times when Eustace seemed to be being with something or someone that the cameras didn't see. In one, it looked like there was a figure in the frame, standing behind Eustace, where you could see just one frame before it disappeared. Experts in the field still say that it was only a problem with the pictures. People who were really there during the workshop couldn't say the same thing. There have been efforts undertaken to figure out some of what was written in the diaries. After they got to know one another, several of the crew members, after the first shock and panic, they started to look into the faces they had seen. The journals that were shown at the workshop became the subject of a lot of interest. What had Eustace been writing down all for these years? Were they just simple records of mountain living and staying alive in the wild? Or did they have something else in them? How carefully he put them away and his strong resistance to let them read the contents suggested that they were more than just notes for yourself. Some said they could stand for decades of noticing patterns in nature, things modern science had missed. Some people tore down this guess. What could an old man find out in his workshop that modern scientists hadn't already found? Some people suggested things even more dark. The journals might be documented encounters that were difficult, all that people knew about the real world, and this was private information, if it ever turned out to be true. The question of the recordings especially scared those who had heard even that short example. What did it mean to get what talks when people aren't? Are you listening? He had taken good care of it. And time to these tapes. Some of the tapes are from decades ago. An audio the engineer who was there that day reported he had tried to figure out what the recording was about, remember it, and make it again. It was easier to let folks hear the sound in than the strange sound that occurred in real time out of the pictures taken that day. His attempt at fun resulted to equipment breakdowns. And based on according to the engineer himself, 3 nights of dreams that were scary and seemed less like regular sleep experiences and more like sending. With each testimonial, people pondered what Eustace had really put these people through. As the months went by, with no more access to the workshop and little contact with Eustace himself, the event turned into a kind of myth. People who had been there started to pondering about their own memories. If the workshop had really been as weird as they remembered, or if the Eustace's strange behavior and the strange atmosphere had changed how they remembered things actually were. No one could believe him. Thoughts anymore. There was no way to be sure. The footage itself became a source of controversy during the making of the movie business. Some managers wanted to say as part of the Mountain Men series, thinking it would make a lot of money interest from viewers. Some people said it should be kept back. They were worried about the moral issues of broadcasting something that was clearly not meant for public use. There was also the making preconceptions about what really happens in the wild. The video was solid proof that something was going on, of the unusual existed. Recent news suggests Eustace has been observed doing more excursions to the workshop than usual. People in the area have said that they spotted light coming through the holes in the walls of the factory as they tried to take a look. What's unusual about that is because the workshop doesn't have any power. For someone like Eustace, who was dedicated to his simple way of life, there was no explanation for where it came from, of this bright light coming from the store and oozing from every crack. The enigma gets deeper with every question that goes unanswered. And there are a lot of them. Students that have gone to recent people who have been to Turtle Island's programs say they are strange experiences. Some people have said that having moments when I don't know where I am, where it looks like the forest is moving them in ways that can't be articulated. Students told each other about having dreams that seemed more real than normal. They learned more about the things they could hear and feel around them. It felt like the filter that helped everyone should ignore these stuff were switched off. It made them antsier and easy to shake. A lot of threw these experiences away as the inevitable outcome of cutting off from technology and getting back in touch with nature. But that couldn't be the only reason. They could occasionally feel the discomfort grow like the goosebumps on their skin. To make sense of everything, this is not to ask what Eustace has workshop. It is to ask what the store is really for. Will the new information show themselves, or will Eustace explain them on time? If he really found something about nature and people, what does it signify for the mind? The rest of the world? How would it be different? The way things are? The class made the crew ask even more questions had planned for. What is even more, it's also worrying that whatever Eustace is what he is working on is not even close to being done. The carved date showed that it was done, but no one could figure out what was going on. Finished. He still goes to the workshop and spends hours, perhaps days there. The lights that are odd and the sounds have kept going, and the people have attempted to get used to this new weirdness. A lot of the new people who moved there because they lived there the world around us. If there was a relationship between this world and another one, if Eustace made a, would it bode doom? Pathway? It all sounded like science. Fiction at best, but that's the truth of it. Crew made no sense at all. The secret is still a mystery, and Eustace Conway doesn't give any reasons. He is aware something that most of us don't know. He will keep working at Turtle Island and be on the show. No, this time you can't really put a name to this strange man. He seems to mean something to the world, and something stronger when nightfall. What do you think about the strange Eustace Conway's interests? Leave your opinions in the comments, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up.